one of the pieces of legislation I know that you've been working on has been to create an Indo-Pacific Deterrence Initiative. And I wonder if you could just share with our listeners and viewers a little bit about what that initiative is.
It has worked so successfully in Europe to have a dedicated source of funding to help work through infrastructure projects, training and exercises, specific things that are needed to help the allies work better. Take that idea and apply it to what we call our priority theater, which is the Indo-Pacific. So I think there is a version of that is in the Senate bill. I do think there will be a version in the House bill.
Do you anticipate a lot of amendments that relate to, should we say, punitive action against the Chinese government?
I think a number of things in this NDAA will have China connection. At the Munich Security Conference in, February of this year, I think 5G was the number one topic in all of the meetings that we had and other nations had. And again, it's partly a focus on the threat from the Chinese, but then the rest of the story is the United States, along with our allies and countries we trust, need to have an alternative.
Can you tell us what you can expect in the NDAA bill regarding shipbuilding and ship construction and the size of the budget there?
As you point out, it is very important, and obviously you were if not the key leader in the House on shipbuilding during your time here. I'll tell you, there's a lot of frustration right now, and I think on both sides of the aisle, and partly because of the turnover in the Navy. One of the challenges we face is that every leg of our strategic triad, as well as the weapons themselves, are aging out all at the same time. So we've got to replace the bombers, we've got to replace the land-based missiles, and we've got to replace the nuclear submarines, which most people consider our most survivable leg of the triad. So all of that is a way of saying the Navy budget is under stress, and those stresses will continue in the future. Especially as you're thinking about the Indo-Pacific. It is so crucial.
When you talk about hypersonic weapons, some constituents sort of are unbelieving that Russia and China in some areas have some degrees of superiority.
We're playing catch up. I think that's the place to start. Other countries, and specifically Russia and China, I think by most accounts are ahead of us in the field of hypersonics. And as you well know, it will have significant consequences. If the Russians and the Chinese are able to have conventional or nuclear hypersonic weapons, it will make a significant difference.
There. You've introduced legislation, I know, to accelerate defense innovation, specifically by promoting some small business technology transfers and public-private partnerships involving the Defense Department. But how do you see those things making their way into the NDAA?
I am most concerned now with the small and middle-sized businesses who would like to do business with the Department of Defense, who may have something that we really need, but it's just too hard. It's too burdensome to go through all of those regulations, all of that time and capital to do business with DOD. So a lot of, I think, what we need to focus on, and what I'm trying to focus on this year in acquisition reform, is to help make DOD a little friendlier place to do business. So one of the things I've done a number of times in recent years is take visits to Silicon Valley, as well as Boston and Austin and other places in the country where a lot of this innovation occurs, and sit down and talk to people who may have a product like you're describing, but have not really been able to break through with DOD. So,
will there be things baked into the NDAA that push the whole issue of trusted sources, or let's say chip manufacturing?
that is such a crucial issue. As we have begun to look at our defense industrial base more closely, the microelectronics is one of the top 2 or 3, if not the top 1 issue that keeps coming up.
How would you assess our strength with NATO right now, and also whether or not you think this move to pull troops out of Germany, where you think that's going, and what the impact of that might be?
There were 22 House Republican members of the House Armed Services Committee who sent a letter to the president saying this is a bad idea.
How are military families in those installations, how are they doing during this pandemic?
Military families are critical not only to the service members, but to our whole national security. As a matter of fact, earlier this year, Trent Kelly, who's our ranking member on the Personnel Subcommittee, and I introduced a family resilience package for inclusion in the Defense Authorization Bill, and I think that most all of that will be included.